Pred dnevom podnebne diplomacije 17. junija gostimo veleposlanike treh najvplivnejših držav Evropske unije, Nemčije, gospa Anno Elizabeth Prinz, veleposlanika Francije, Pierra Françoisa Mourillia in veleposlanico Velike Britanije in Irske, Sophie Honey. So, maybe just to start with first question, what are your countries expecting from Paris this year?
Well, I think we have a unique chance that Paris will be a success, because now a lot of countries have already started to change their environmental policy because they are more aware of the effects of climate change, because they see the natural disasters and they see all the problems coming up. And now we had just the G7 summit in Germany, where the 7 leaders agreed, which is really great, to finish with fossil energy until the end of the century, which is also our goal. In Germany, we will have it finished. We will have 80% renewables in 2050 and 20% fossil only. So this is leading the way. And I think also concerning the targets, 70% compared to 2010 reduction of CO2 emissions, which is a goal which is really very challenging. And now we will have to see each country how we implement this in our countries, because let's face it, it's not easy. There are lots of complications, but we are on a good way.
Thank you.
I can only bring water to the meal of my excellent colleague. Actually, this Paris conference will be a kind of, I hope so, a kind of milestone for the history of the fight against climate change. There is a global awareness in the world that is rising that climate change it's happening now, and it's like we say in the US, it's a situation, a real situation that we have to face. So this global awareness will have the chance to become reality at the Paris conference. Of course, the French presidency will have to be neutral in this, from that respect. But we really hope that we will go to a global, universal, and binding agreement. That's the objective. Enough talks, enough just declarations of intention. Now we have to act, and we have to act swiftly and bravely, courageously towards to tackle the climate change issue. I remind you of some milestones. Kyoto, Rio in 1992. It was the first one worldwide kind of awareness of the fact that something was going wrong. But it was not binding. And then we had the Kyoto Protocol, which was a huge step ahead. But unfortunately, a lot of countries did not really feel implicated in the Kyoto Protocol. And now I think, again, that we have the chance to have all countries, or almost all countries, from the most developed to the emerging country, or not really developed countries, participating in this global effort. Each, of course, with its own means and with its own history and level of development. So again, the aim is to draft a convincing, universal agreement, binding agreement, and also to raise money to be sure that we will tackle this issue of climate change. One number, just one. We have to stick to the objective. No more than 2% of climate change up, 2 degrees, Celsius of climate change until the end of the century, which seems to be not so ambitious, but believe me, it's really ambitious.
Really, yes.
Really ambitious.
I would say that there are reasons to be sceptical. We've all lived through climate change negotiations in the
Exactly.
past, which have embodied hope, and then we've all seen the failure, protracted negotiations, and the failure to reach agreement, and the huge disappointment that has involved. But I think that those reasons for scepticism are outweighed this time by the reasons for hope. I think the thing that has changed is that there is an increasing international consensus that climate change is real, that human activity is the dominant cause, and that we have to take action now. I think that we have long been committed to this, and within the UK we have a legally binding framework for emissions. But I think the thing that's changed is some of the biggest emitting countries, so such as the US and China, are coming on board with this agenda, and so I really hope that will lead to a significant change and new milestones in December. And that's what we are all working extremely hard for.
But is there a unique and one voice possible of European Union? Your countries rely on different schemes. You rely on renewables. You're more in, nuclear energy. And you're more like services, not more any hard, big industries. So you don't use any more energy a lot like Germany, and you adopted the first climate change act in Europe. How do you
Well,
talk?
no, I think we have agreed in the European Union on 30% reduction already. So Germany has done even more, like 40%, and people do as much as they can. I think it's important to set the framework conditions, but how to reach the goal is different. For example, Slovenia can have more water power, geothermal power, other things, whereas Germany wants to plant more windmills into the North Sea. We will have a mix, because it always has to be a mix. The main problem, because we know diversity is much more efficient, is much cheaper. The challenge is how to regulate energy flows and how to take care that in times of, let's say, no sunshine, no wind, no whatever resources available, there has to be a backup. So this is what we are working on in research. I think it will be difficult. It was more difficult to convince countries to go along earlier. But now, look at China. You can't see the other side of the road anymore. People are convinced they have to do it. They are now investing 150 billion in renewable energy installations or what have you, which is a boost for growth and will also be a growth market for us in Europe. Germany, last year we invested 18 billion on this path, which is of course developing a lot of new working places, and we have to do it, because if we shut down the coal mines, in some areas this will cost, like Vattenfall now, a Swedish company, they want to close, it will cost 8,000 working places. So we are talking here not about energy, we are talking about dialogue with the labor unions to see how we can create new jobs, and we don't need this energy in the long run to that extent any longer. So we are talking about manageable change. And now we have these discussions right now. It's a policy question. Do you add an additional tax in order to shut down coal mines? Or do you give them some money in order to be the safety valve in case alternative energy have certain deficiencies yet, to be a reserve, which is also valuable. So there are different avenues to do it. But back to the basic line, I think we have agreed that every country wants to do it its own way and has an internal dialogue, because earlier our governments made the mistake to put all eggs in one basket. Like Japan, all eggs in the nuclear basket. So they have to invest a lot now to diversify. That's why I think we are all very much better off now, because diversification brings new jobs and brings more security, foreign policy independence, maybe less nuclear arms in the long run, no conflicts where to put nuclear waste or other things, and we are becoming more reasonable in this respect.
I would add. I share the views of Anna. Last October, the European Union adopted a climate and energy package with the goal of setting a target of at least 40% of emissions reductions until 2030, which is quite ambitious. So from a macroeconomic point of view, we are all on the same boat. We have all the same goal, actually. And it's the first time that the EU shows so much solidarity. That's the important thing. From the microeconomic point of view, we can have different models. It's not true, by the way, to say that some countries are more industrialized than others. We are all industrial countries, not UK with only services, Germany with only coal mines, and France, it's more complicated than it looks, actually. So we have different paths and different choices ahead of us. The truth is that we all want to diversify. All of us want to diversify. In France, we decreased our emissions of greenhouse gases by 12% since 1990, mostly through nuclear energy, I must say, which is still 75% of our production of electricity. But we want to diversify. We don't want to have all our eggs in the same basket. And we just passed a law in late May, actually, in France, which is very ambitious, which is called energy transition towards green growth. Mind you, green growth, the two are not opposite but complementary, and we want to decrease the share of nuclear energy in French electricity production at 50% by 2025. 2025 is tomorrow. It's really quick, actually. So we, at the end of the day, our policy energy mixes will look like more and more. Actually, of course, in France we will have nuclear energy for the years to come. Great Britain also, I think, but still our energy mix will be quite comparable. And again, the objective is to decrease by 40% until 2030, and we will keep this goal and we will reach this goal.
Well, yeah, I would say that there is a strong united EU voice on the top level goal, and that's absolutely right. And I think we should give ourselves credit for the fact that that has helped build the international consensus that we've been talking about, that the optimists hope will overcome those reasons for scepticism and bring about a change in Paris. But I think it's absolutely right that there is then flexibility at national level about how you get there. There's no need to have a blanket approach the same for everyone. Slovenia will inevitably take different decisions on how to achieve that goal than the UK or France or Germany. In the UK, you might say we take more of a middle path. Nuclear is an important part of our mix, but we also have a really big drive on renewables and low carbon technology. And by taking those different paths, that has another benefit as well, that collectively we explore lots of different routes to meet this really important international goal, and can also learn from the experiences that we all have in coming years.
Mm-hmm. I think there are also chances. If you look at the oil market right now, prices have dropped significantly, which makes it much easier for the economy to grow.
Yes, but that's not a good sign for climate negotiations, I think.
I think it is, yet. Still.
Low prices of oil?
Right, because you have more room to invest, because credits are also cheaper and the burden is eased for everyone. I think you might be right in the sense that if you calculate efficiency, there are different models to do it. Okay, we have decided to exit nuclear energy in 2022 completely, and there are different calculations about cost of this energy. I don't want to explore on that. There are different ways of calculating cost also of renewables. If you have, let's say, a village, now they're trying many things, a village with 450 cows, and they can produce the energy for 2,800 households. It's a new way of doing it. You can't do it for an enterprise or a big production line, but there's so many various things to do it. I think in the long run we will save money and competitiveness by not depending so much on exports or on risks that are difficult to calculate, like storage of waste or other things. So in the long run, I think we have at the moment the situation where we are trying to solve problems like storage of energy, backups, the regulations, also between countries of access energy. And we haven't solved everything yet. There's a lot to be done in research, and I see this as a chance.
I do agree with Anna. On the short term, the shale gases and the drop in the price of oil is a problem. We have to face it. That's true. And we, in a way, the economic crisis from 2008 to almost until now was a chance for the fight against climate change, because it helped us involuntarily, of course, to reduce our emissions, because we produced less as a planet, actually. Now, cheap prices of energy may be a problem, because we will be less cautious to use this energy, and we will burn fossil fuels. The US burn shale gases, etc. But it's only a short-term view. On the long run, all the economies we make in this fuel that we don't pay will be reinvested into renewables energy, windmills, geothermy, etc., etc. You name it, in all our countries actually. And on the long run, it's definitely a chance. As Sophie said just a few minutes ago, the fact that the US plans almost 30% reduction of the greenhouse gases emissions until 2025 is a huge step ahead. Just remember a few years ago how the US president was, let's say, a climato-skeptic at least. It's not the case anymore. And China is just because they cannot breathe anymore. They are rational people, ultra-rational people, and they just want to change things because it's not sustainable. So there is no plan B, because there is no planet B, as Ban Ki-moon used to say. That's a fact, and we cannot escape that. So in a way, as very often politicians and public servants ourselves, we decide to do things, bold things, when we really are forced to do it. And now we are forced to do it, definitely.